Well, let's talk to Paul Scully MP, Minister for London, because it turns out that there's a part of London which is in a terrible mess, a stinking mess, you might say, because there's a bin strike that's been going on for a couple of weeks, and the streets are literally covered with rubbish. Overflowing bins, you know, nastiness spreading about all over the place, rats everywhere. People are complaining that they see more rats now than they've ever seen in their whole time living in Tower Hamlets, which is a place just a little bit east of here from the Tower Bridge. Paul, a very good afternoon to you. Thanks for joining us.
Afternoon to you. Good to see you, Mike.
So what's this? I mean, I'm assuming that the bins are on strike because they want more money. I know sometimes they've outsourced this. If it's a local council, they'll sometimes hire a private company to do it. What's the situation?
Yeah, so from my understanding, look, as I say, you know, I'm a government minister. This is done at a council level. And what you have, my understanding of it, is you've got the National Joint Council, which is a group of local government representatives that work to do a national bargaining agreement with the unions, and but it's been a particular issue in Tower Hamlets where they've gone out on strike, and because there's so many food places in Tower Hamlets, it's well known for its curry houses, etc. A lot of food waste there, a lot of businesses have been affected, and so over the last 8-9 days since they've been on strike, this has just piled up hugely. And so it's really good that they've reached a resolution, but boy, have they got a lot to clear up. And it just goes to show what happens when people just, you know, the unions just double down on this and the councils aren't speaking to them properly as well.
Well, that's the problem, isn't it? Because now we're getting people telling us that there are rats everywhere, that there's a sort of public health issue now because of all the, you know, it's not been that cool either, so it's been quite warm. And the rubbish is basically just sort of strewn everywhere. And I'm old enough to remember the great strikes of the 1970s when Leicester Square was just a giant heap of black bags and rats. It was disgusting. And it must be awful for people who live there.
Absolutely. Look, I used to be a councillor, and I know from a councillor, elected councillor, rule number one is never mess with people's bin collections.
Yeah.
It's one of the things you do as a council, but it's probably the most visible thing that a councillor can do is just making sure that the bins are collected. And when it gets to this state, when you've got 6-foot-high piles of rubbish, when you've got rats running around the place, not only does it affect the residents, the smell, the horrible nature of it, and then you start to attract antisocial behaviour because people just don't take any pride in their area. And of course the businesses are affected, and so people visit Tower Hamlets, especially places like Brick Lane, for their experience. Are they going to come a second time if they see all that? Of course they're not. So it's really important that they do resolve it and clean it up as quickly as possible.
Absolutely. So what's the absolute sort of what you're understanding to be anyway of the resolution? Are they going to be back out on the streets today, tomorrow?
Yeah. So what I understand is that they've come up with an agreement between Tower Hamlets Council and United Union at a local level, and then they're going to have the binmen coming back. I think they're going to still likely need private contractors, as they've been trying to use private contractors to stem the problem, keep the problem on the lid a bit, but it's going to take a while because there's so much there.
Right.
And so that needs to be sorted ASAP. They need to really prioritise that.
Yeah, so I mean, it could well be a pretty stinky place for a few days.
Yeah, exactly that. And of course, so all those businesses in particular are going to be really suffering because people aren't going to come back.
Yeah,
so,
and also if you're just in a private household or if a block of flats or something, what are you supposed to do with your rubbish? You can't just chuck it out on the street, can you?
And that's what starts to happen. The longer you leave it, people just say, you know what, well, there's a load of rubbish there, I'll just add my bit to it. And you get fly tipping, you get all sorts of problems. That's why the council now they've resolved it, they've got to keep the grip and just get in and sort it out, clean the mess up.
Right. Because, I mean, the worry, of course, is somebody gets bitten by one of these rats, or your dog gets bitten by one of these rats, because they're huge, these rats. I've seen them in, there was a town in Wales, I think, that was down in Bristol, they had these sort of giant rats. I mean, because once you give them enough food, they just keep eating.
I love your title, Giant Rat, your subtitle there, Giant Rats Relish 6 foot. I haven't seen those rats, but look, I think they always say, don't they, in London, that you're never that far away from
7 feet, apparently, right?
It's 7 feet, exactly. But you see other parts of London where you wouldn't know because it's tidy, it's kept well, the rubbish is collected regularly. People take a pride in their area, keep their own area right if it's looked after by the council as well. That's clearly fallen way by the wayside in this instance.
Right. And just before I let you go, Paul, I must ask you about this terrible incident this morning in Croydon, where a young girl has had her life ended, 15-year-old girl, on her way to school, stabbed to death. I mean, if this does not I mean, in any way change the policies of Sadiq Khan and the way that the place is being run, and the anti-knife crime sort of, you know, pursuits, I don't know what will.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so heartbreaking to hear yet another example of a young life lost way too soon. And I'll be thinking about her family and all her friends that they'll be paying tribute to and you know, in sorrow today. But we've got to get a grip with knife crime. You've got that strand of work with the Met Police that's still in special measures. You've got to give Mark Rowley the tools to do the job, to sort out, to make sure that police can get onto those fundamental things. The mayor himself has got to stop just sort of virtue signalling and really, as our de facto police commissioner, get a grip and realise that knife crime, not only is it ending people's lives, it's taking people who's got the knife in their hand and ending their life in many ways, because they'll be put in prison and criminal records, etc. And you've got to stem it at a young age to make sure people don't pick that knife up in the first place.
It's like, you know, you say, I mean, it's like you've got to change the thought process, haven't you? Somehow change that culture that makes these young people think that carrying a knife is a good idea.
It's really complex, but you start, but you know, work backwards. First of all, stop and search, get those things right, have a deterrent, have strong sentencing to make sure that people aren't picking up the knives. But yes, you've got to go back further than that. It's not just that easy, exactly, to try and change minds at a young age. Primary school, really. Yeah. It's, you know, by the time you get to secondary school, and definitely by the time someone's picked up a knife, way too late. Right. You've got to get into young people's minds that easy options, getting into drugs, getting into gang culture and things like that, they may be offering you something, but boy, there is no future for you there.
No, exactly right. Paul, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Paul Scully, Minister for London, MP, of course, for the Tory party as well. A man that would make a great mayor, actually, of this city, because something is surely going to have to now be done, because it's not good enough to just keep saying, oh, knife crime statistics are terrible, knife crime's going up, there's thousands and thousands of cases every single year. A young girl, a 15-year-old teenage girl, has been stabbed to death this morning at 8:30. She was on her way to school. I mean, what more do you need to know? That's it. And it's time, surely, that this awful, awful carnage ends. Sadiq Khan needs to make that happen.